Hey guys, HackerSploit here, back again with another video, and in this video we're going to be looking at how to use the Uncomplicated Firewall, or as it is commonly known as UFW on Linux. Alright, so you might be asking, what exactly is UFW or what is the Uncomplicated Firewall if it isn't already self-explanatory? Well, UFW or the Uncomplicated Firewall acts as an interface to IP tables and is designed to simplify the process of configuring a firewall. Now, you also might be asking, well, what exactly is IP tables? Well, IP tables is an extremely flexible firewall utility that was built for Linux operating systems. Now, you also might be asking, well, why aren't we using IP tables? Why are we using UFW as opposed to IP tables? Well, IP tables is a great tool that offers great functionality when it comes down to configuring firewalls. However, it can be difficult for beginners to learn how to use it properly when configuring a firewall. As a result, UFW is well suited for beginners, and as a result they can learn how to use a firewall or how to configure a firewall really easily, and they can learn about rules, etc. They get the general idea behind a firewall. All right, so UFW is a great firewall that is designed to be run on hosts or servers, but its only downfall is in the extent it offers in terms or in regards to functionality. What I mean by this, it only goes so far as allowing you to block or allow connections to and from the server, so incoming and outgoing, and you can also block IP addresses, ports, etc., an entire subnet, which I'll get into in a second. All right. So the purpose of this video is to teach you how to use UFW and all the commands that you need to know to get started and to fully utilize it to its to your advantage, really. So this will include commands such as allowing and blocking various services by port and their source IP addresses. And this video should be used as a reference. So if this is your first time with UFW, you can definitely find something that you didn't know in this video. If this is if you're already an experienced user of UFW, hopefully you can find something in this video that you didn't know already. All right. So without any further ado, let's get started. So installing UFW is very simple. Now, if you are using an Ubuntu server or you're running Ubuntu, UFW should be pre-installed on it. If it isn't, getting it installed on any other distribution is very simple. Use your aptitude package manager. So sudo apt-get install UFW. I already have mine installed, so it'll check for an update. If there isn't an update, it's not going to update it and it's going to give me the results here. All right, so once it is installed, we are ready to begin. Now, the important bits of using UFW are always knowing its state or its status. All right, so currently I have UFW disabled. It is not running. And if I wanted to know that, I would simply type in sudo UFW status. Now, it is very important to precede the UFW command with sudo if you're not using a root user. In my case, I'm using the root user, so I don't need to use the sudo command. But in any case, I will use it so that it becomes a good practice with you. And I don't recommend running UFW from the root user, but this is a simple video for demonstration. All right, so I'm going to hit enter. It's going to tell you the status of the UFW or the Uncomplicated Firewall is inactive, which is great. All right, now I can also check an additional, I can get more information from the status command by typing in Verbose, which will give me more information in regards to the rules that are currently active. Now, as you guessed, it will not display anything because we haven't set any particular rules, and the firewall is currently not active, so nothing really special there. And the last status command that is very popular is to show the status, the numbered status, so that you have an idea of what rules are currently running and their number, so that you can terminate or delete them. All right, so that's what it's there for. Now, of course, these don't make any sense right now because the current status of the firewall is inactive. Once we activate it, or once it is active, we will be able to get a whole lot more information from them. All right, so I'm going to enter, and again you'll see it's going to tell you that it is inactive, and that is fine. All right, so let's talk about enabling, disabling, and resetting UFW. So enabling UFW is very simple. Sudo UFW and enable, and that will enable the firewall, and it'll give you the little status over here. The firewall is active and is enabled on system startup, which is excellent, so that it is always active. And if you are running a server, that is huge for you. All right, so disabling it is very simple. We simply type in disable and we hit enter. All right, and that will tell you that the firewall is stopped and disabled on system startup. Now, when I talk about resetting the UFW or the uncomplicated firewall, this is in regards to the rules that you might have set. Now, please do use caution with the reset command. The reset command is there to help you out if you have made a mistake in configuring your firewall. Now, if you already have a working firewall and you only want to delete a particular rule, do not use the reset command, because that will reset your firewall to the default configuration that it came with pre-installed or installed, or the configuration it came with installed. All right, so if I type in sudo UFW reset, that will reset it, and it'll tell you that, which is very good. Resetting all the rules to the installed defaults. Proceed with operation Y or N for yes or no. Hit yes to reset it, and there you are. So that is a small FYI, if in case you wanted to know that and you've messed up in this video and you want to reset it, there you are. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with understanding the default policies for the UFW or the uncomplicated firewall. All right, so the default policies for UFW are as follows. Now, before we do that, let me explain something. So UFW by default will deny all incoming connections but will allow all outgoing connections. So what is happening here is sudo UFW, and you can always use this to restore it to its default policies. So sudo UFW default deny incoming. All right, so that is the default connection for incoming, or the default connection status for all incoming connections. So by default, UFW will deny all incoming connections, and it will allow all outgoing connections. So it will allow all default outgoing connections. Now, of course, you can change this to whatever you want. If you want incoming connections to be allowed while the firewall is active, then you can also do that as well. So I can say default allow incoming. All right, which is not the smartest thing to do if you're running this on a server. You want to manage what connections are incoming in case your server is being attacked. But that is a very, very different story. And hopefully I'll make a video on that later on in configuring a server for security. In this case, we'll just leave them to its defaults, all right, which are going to be set by default. You don't need to set them. I'm simply explaining to you how to do it and how to change them if you want to change them. All right, so this is great for normal systems, but when it comes down to servers, it becomes a little bit different, and you want to be able to manage the incoming connections in regards to services and ports and the IP addresses that are going to be allowed to connect to your computer or your server. All right. So what I want to do is, the first thing I want to do is I'm going to talk about services and IPs. All right, so if I want to allow an incoming SSH connection, how do I do that? Well, it's very simple. So sudo UFW allow SSH. All right, and this is going to allow all SSH connections. It's going to allow incoming SSH connections. All right, which is okay if as long as you have a private key and you've properly secured the SSH connection and the authentication. All right, so I'm going to hit enter. It's going to tell me rule is updated. Fantastic. You can also do this by typing in the port. So I can say sudo UFW allow 22, and it's going to update the rules accordingly. Now, if I want to disable SSH incoming SSH, I can say sudo UFW deny SSH. All right, and I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to tell me the rule is updated, which is also very, very good. And of course, you can do that with the port as well. But with services, these are the particular services, services by the name in which they are sorted. So SSH is going to be known as SSH, and it knows that SSH uses port 22. All right, let's talk about working with port 80 or HTTP connections. So that is what unencrypted web servers use, and the connections can be allowed with the following command. So you can type in sudo UFW allow HTTP, and we hit enter. It's going to update the rules, and you can also do it with using using the port, which is port 80. Hit enter, and there you are. In my case, I'm going to deny this, so I'm going to say deny HTTP. Hit enter, and we're good again. All right, so what I'm going to do is, before we actually continue, I'm going to leave some services running so that when I enable the firewall, you'll be able to see them when I essentially check the status. All right, so I'm going to say UFW enable or sorry, allow SSH, because I want to allow SSH connections. Sorry about that, my typing is pretty bad right now. Allow SSH, there we are, fantastic, and we can move on to the next protocols and services. Now, talking about HTTPS or port 443, that is again what encrypted web servers use and can be allowed with the following command. So you can type in sudo UFW allow HTTPS and hit enter, and that's going to allow HTTPS connections. Again, that can be replicated or duplicated with the port 443. In this case, I'm just going to deny the connection. So I'm just going to HTTPS, and there we are. So the rules are going to be updated successfully for IPv4 and IPv6 as well. That is why you have rules updated for both the protocols over here. All right, now if you want to allow both HTTP and HTTPS, you can do that in one command, and that is done by typing sudo UFW allow, and you can also deny it as well. So the protocol is going to be TCP. Proto is TCP. You can also change that depending on what protocol you're using. So from any target, or you can also use the IP. So from this particular target, but I'll get to that in a second. So we're going to say from any computer, we are simply going to allow the connection from any to any port, and we specify the port. So port 80 and 443. Hit enter. The rules are updated. So we can also deny it as well, which is what I'm going to do because I don't want that running. So deny, and voila. All right, so that is how to run it in one command. And the key words here are going to be the allow and deny. That is the most important bit here. All right, if you're talking about FTP, that is again UFTP, UFW, what am I talking? UFW allow FTP or port 21. And that can also be denoted by port 21 TCP. Hit enter, and it's going to, because it already exists, we can then say deny. And you need to specify with FTP that we're using it in TCP. So deny rules updated successfully, and that is how to configure or enable and disable FTP connections. All right, now let's move on to IP addresses. Now, before we actually move on to IP addresses, for services, this is all done through the port and also through the name. So if you're running POP3, a POP3 mail server, you can also do it as well. If you're running MySQL, I can say UFW allow 3306. That is a MySQL database, and I'm just going to deny it, or I'll leave that running so that we can also check the status. I don't have a MySQL server running on this computer, but that's how one would do it. So in most cases, you want to deny connections to your MySQL database. So in this case, I'm going to say 3306, deny any connections to that particular port. And of course, I can specify the IPs with my previous command that I showed you right over here. So I can say UFW deny protocol TCP from any to any port, and then specify 3306 here. Hit enter. The rules are going to be updated, so we can deny all connections to our SQL database, which is hugely important. And that's why you have open databases running and available to be accessed publicly on Shodan. They can simply be exposed. So this is one of the things you must do on your firewall. All right, so getting back to IP addresses, again, it's very, very simple. So if I want to allow incoming connections from a particular IP address, I can simply type in UFW allow, and I type in the IP. So allow from 192.168.1.1, which is my gateway or access point IP address, which is important because if I don't allow incoming connections from it, I essentially won't be able to get any internet access. So I'm going to hit allow, which is important. And that's very, very important, as I mentioned, when your firewall is active, because if you want to allow incoming connections, you need to specify what IP or what IP subnet they may be belonging to. So an example I can give you here is if you want to specify a particular port for a particular IP address. For example, I only want the IP address 192.168.1.103 to access SSH. I can type in the following. So I say sudo UFW allow from 192.168.1.103 to any port 22. So this will only allow this particular IP address to access the SSH service. I'm going to enter. It's going to say rules are updated. Now, if you're wondering, the IP address 192.168.1.103 is my Windows operating system, and I usually connect to my Kali operating system to it remotely via PuTTY. All right, so that is a good rule to have. When talking about subnets, it's very, very simple again. So sudo ufw allow from, and we specify the subnet range here, 192.168.1.1 and 24. But I don't want to do that because I only want particular IP addresses to essentially to be allowed in regards to incoming connection. So I'm not gonna hit enter, but that is how to specify a particular subnet. You can also disable or deny particular connections. All right, so we have already talked about denying access, and again, it is all in regards to what you want to do in regards to the IP. So what I can say, for example, if I wanted to allow a particular subnet to access the MySQL database, I can say, for example, sudo ufw allow from 192.168.1.1 and 24 and to any port, I can say any port 3306. Of course, that is a very stupid thing to do, so I'll just keep it to port 22, which is SSH. So all of my computers in my subnet should be able to access this computer via the SSH port only. I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to tell me rule changed after normalization because we already had it active. So it is changed it and updated the rule. All right, so let's talk about deleting rules, because that is essentially as far as it will go in regards to allowing and denying rules to incoming and outgoing connections to and from your firewall. So we've looked at allowing and denying ports, services, and IP addresses. Let's talk about deleting particular rules. So now that we've set our rules, we can essentially enable the firewall now. So I'm going to say sudo, sorry about that, sudo enable, and we type in sudo ufw enable, sorry about that, ufw enable. I was getting a bit confused there with Iptables. Ufw enable, and that's going to enable the firewall. Excellent. So now we can check the status. All right. So the status, as I mentioned, is very, very simple to check, which, by the way, is going to include the number status. So the default status is sudo ufw status. I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to give you the current status of the firewall. All right. So TCP is going to be allowed, which is port 22, which is SSH, is going to be allowed, which is incoming. It's going to allow TCP, wait, we have port 80, deny, allow for it again. So incoming and outgoing. The same goes for what we had set for, the rule set for both HTTP and HTTPS. We had set our FTP rule set here. We had set our MySQL database rule set here to deny. Again, we had set it via TCP. Remember, it's very important to specify the protocol. We then have, again, we set the rules to now a particular IP address. Remember, from here, they were all from anywhere or any particular source. So allow all connections coming from my access point. Allow all SSH connections incoming from this particular IP. Allow any incoming SSH connections from any particular IP in this subnet, which I set incorrectly. It should have been 1, not 0. That's my primary access point that is sitting outside of my office. And then we have all the settings for the IPv6 protocol. So that is how to check the status. Now, if you want to display a bit more information, we use the verbose command, verbose over here, and that'll give you a bit more information. And this is primarily what I like using. So this is the status that I like using, the verbose status, because it tells you the status is active, logging is on low. The default policies are to deny incoming and allow outgoing, as I mentioned. And now we have for port 22 under the protocol TCP, we want to allow incoming connections. We want to allow incoming connections there, which is not clever, but anyway, we had set it to any computer on this subnet, so that makes sense. We want to deny incoming HTTP connections. We want to allow then incoming HTTP connections. And that's because I was actually showing you that we can actually disable it. So I can say UFW, we can say deny port 80. And it's going to update it, and we hit enter, and there we are. So now it's where we're simply denying the rules here, which is great. All right, so deny for both port 80, which is HTTP. For HTTPS, we are also denying, and that's simply giving you the action. So we're denying or allowing in connections, and the only ones being allowed inside are going to be for the SSH port right over here and right over here, which are going to simply be allowing particular IP addresses and the entire subnet and all IP addresses from the connection. Now you might want to change this if you want to only specify a particular subnet. But that's simply how to check the verbose status. Now, if you want to look at the numbered status, which is important because you might want to delete a particular rule, you do that by typing sudo UFW status numbered, like so, and we hit enter, and that is going to number all of the rules that you had set, which is very important if you want to delete a particular rule. All right, so let's take a look at how to delete a particular rule. So if I wanted to delete rule 1 and 2, I can do that. So I can type in sudo UFW delete and I simply type in 1, for example, and that is going to ask me, do I want to delete this particular rule? I'm going to hit yes, and then I'm going to hit I want to delete rule 2 as well, and yes. And if we check the status, the verbose status here, we can see yes, now we are talking. Now we have we have correctly set up our firewall here, so it's going to allow in connections. So we can also get rid of that one as well. So we're going to simply display the status here, the numbered status. So let's get rid of 1 as well. 1 here, yes, we want to get rid of that. And if we show the status once more, we can see that yes, we are denying all connections, all HTTP connections, all HTTPS connections, and we also set this rule, which is a duplicate rule of both these two. So I'm showing you how to do it really shortly. We are denying FTP, we are denying MySQL access via TCP, and also the port, whether it be on TCP or UDP, regardless. The only ones we're allowing inside are going to be connections coming from this particular IP, which is the access point, and this particular IP, which is my Windows operating system, and that is going to be allowed on port 22. And the entire subnet is going to be allowed on port 22, which is really redundant because I should have just gotten rid of this one right over here. But regardless, that is how to delete the particular rules. And if you want to reset it, again, resetting it is very, very simple. To take it back to the defaults, that is if you have messed up your rule set and you want to just start over fresh. So sudo UFW reset, and we hit enter. It's going to ask you yes. And remember, the firewall is still active. So if I just check the status, it's going to tell us that it is inactive. That's because we reset it. So if we enable it, so UFW enable, and we'll then check the status. Right now we don't have any rules set. So that is how to use UFW, or the uncomplicated firewall, to allow incoming and outgoing connections to ports from IP addresses, particular IP addresses, their services, how to delete particular rules, and how to monitor the current rule set that you have set up. So that is pretty much all you need to know in regards to getting started and fully utilizing UFW, in regards to configuring a particular operating system or a server, if that's what you're working with. So yeah, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or suggestions, let me know in the comment section, on my social networks, on my website, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Peace.